It's time for the real Jonathan Smith Show. This is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? It's the real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket. Hopefully you've had a nice start to your week. I know I have. Things are just rolling right along. We got more college hoops tonight. Indiana taking on Wisconsin, and then, no, that's at 9 o'clock. First, we got Purdue and Iowa. That game's on at 7. And then from there, we move on to Indiana, hopefully, but probably not, turning things around for this upcoming season. Big show today. Jared Dubin, he's going to join the show coming up at 11. We'll talk a little NBA hoops. And, of course, the Super Bowl, because, you know, Mr. Dubin just covers it all. But we're going to start with Indiana and Wisconsin tonight. Indiana hasn't won on the road at Wisconsin since 1998, which is, you know, just incredible. That's, you know, since 1998. I wasn't even alive then. That's how long it's been, 27 years. And, you know, when Indiana won that game, Andre Patterson was the leading scorer. Okay, the last time Indiana won at Wisconsin, Dick Bennett, father of former Virginia head coach Tony Bennett, you know, the guy who retired this year, he was the head coach at Wisconsin when Indiana won that game. January 25th, 1998. That is the last time the Hoosiers won on the road at Wisconsin. Titanic was the #1 movie in theaters. Savage Garden song. I don't even know who Savage Garden is. They had the #1 hit at the time called Truly Lovely Deeply. Never even heard of that song. Bill Clinton's issues started to surface around that time. The Broncos and John Elway beat the Packers and Brett Favre that year in the Super Bowl. Speaking of Super Bowl, we got a little bit of stuff on that today. Why am I telling you this? I just want to emphasize how long it's been since Indiana went on the road at Wisconsin. I hadn't even been conceived yet. It's crazy. It's been 27 years since Indiana won at Wisconsin. And it'll be 28 years after tonight. There is absolutely no way that Indiana's winning tonight on the road in Madison. No shot. Right? And there's no way I'm betting on them to cover or anything, because Omar Ballo's a cancer. He just is. He's causing a lot of issues, not listening to coaches, not respecting his teammates, just kind of being allowed to run wild and do whatever he wants. Okay, you know, people are calling out Luka in the NBA over these past few days for being a problem in Dallas. But all he does is drink some beer during the season. And you know what else Luka doesn't do? He doesn't get in the way of winning. And that's the really interesting thing about the Mavericks. They can be upset about his conditioning and lack of defense, but when he plays, the Mavericks win. Meanwhile, Omar Ballo does get in the way of winning. Okay, sure, he leads the Big Ten in rebounding, and, you know, if he catches the ball 5 feet from the bucket, he can score. But, I mean, outside of that, like, he doesn't really do much. You know, he rings his teammates out in the middle of a game, a nationally televised game at Purdue. Seriously, and speaking of Purdue, why did Indiana have a chance to win that game on Friday night? It was because Mackenzie Mbako and Trey Galloway both played arguably their best games of the season. Mackenzie Mbako scored 25 points. That ties his second highest scoring output for this season. He had 31 in the first game of the year against SIUE. Trey Galloway put up 15 points, which was his second highest scoring output on the season. So they both played out of their minds, spectacular. And I just don't think that we're going to see that again. Trey Galloway has scored in double figures 9 times in 22 games this year. He's only had back-to-back double-digit scoring games once. He had 11 in back-to-back games. I doubt he's going to play that well again, because the history of, you know, his past 5 years in Bloomington and the history of this season so far tells me that Trey Galloway is not going to play as well tonight as he did against Purdue, because he's just been incapable of stringing together back-to-back good games. So he's not going to play that well again. Now, Mbako might keep it rolling. He just might, because he's played really well 3 games in a row, right? He's got back-to-back games scoring 20 points or more. Okay. Or excuse me, in 2 of his last 3 games, he scored 20 points or more. He scored 20 against Northwestern, 16, and then 25 against Purdue. Okay, so he's been rolling. He's been shooting it very efficiently as well in those games. He's shooting 58% over his last 3 games. All right, so maybe he's turned a corner. Maybe he's finally going to be what he should have been before this season started, and that is the best player on this Indiana basketball team, or at least the best offensive player on this Indiana basketball team, because he's 6'8", he can shoot it, he finishes well around the rim, and he's got a pretty decent handle for his size. Okay, so maybe he keeps it going, but before this 3-game stretch, he'd been pretty inconsistent. But let's say he keeps it going. Let's say Mackenzie Mbako comes out again tonight, shoots 52% from the floor, which would be a downgrade from his last 3 games, and he finishes with, let's call it 20 points. That's a pretty good night. Even if he does that, who's going to offer support? Who's going to show up alongside him and make the plays needed? Because, look, even if Mbako plays well, you're playing against Wisconsin, who's averaging over 81 points a game this year. You have to have another player who can go score points. You have to have it. And, sure, Mackenzie Mbako could come out and be great again, but I don't know. You really think Malik Renew's going to show up and dominate? I don't think he will. He's gotten worse and worse as the season has progressed. We already covered Trey Galloway. I doubt he has back-to-back good games. I just who's the other guy going to be? Omar Ballo. Do we really trust Omar Ballo to be anything more than an issue? I don't. I can tell you that right now. So, who's the other guy going to be? They have to have a second player who can step up and help score. Okay? So, we'll see who it is. It probably won't be Myles Rice. Maybe it's Luke Goody. Maybe he shoots the lights out. But I'm not going to put my hopes in that. And why would I? Why would I or you or anyone bet on this IU team tonight? They haven't beaten a good team all year. Why in the world should anyone think that they're going to play a good 40 minutes on the road in a place they haven't won in 27 years? They're 8.5-point underdogs playing against a Wisconsin team that can really score it. The last time, Indiana played against teams that could really score it, they gave up a bunch of points to Iowa. They gave up, 81 points to Purdue, who only hit 2 threes. Okay, they are not winning tonight. They're not going to cover the 8.5-point spread. This team is going to collapse at some point. It's coming. They have too many issues for it not to happen. They do. And I'm sorry, but leaders like Luke Goody and Anthony Leal aren't going to keep this team together. It's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And so Indiana's got issues, and at some point, that's going to get in the way. A team, though, that doesn't have issues is Purdue. Okay, Purdue, they're a 7.5-point favorite tonight on the road against Iowa. Purdue's clearly better than Iowa. They're ranked 7th in the country now, which feels a little surreal. It does. It feels a little high, honestly. Iowa State's a really good basketball team. Michigan State, that's a really good basketball team. Texas A&M beat Purdue earlier in the season, and they're ranked below them. Marquette beat Purdue earlier in the season, and they're ranked below them. To be fair, though, to the Boilermakers, you're better now than you were when you lost to Texas A&M and Marquette, right? The defensive side of the ball has really taken a step in the proper direction. Okay, so I'm not going to be too hard on Purdue for being ranked 7th in the country, even though they're probably ranked a little bit too high. With that being said, they're clearly better than Iowa. Purdue actually plays this thing called defense, but due to the style of play that Iowa has, they can beat anybody on any given night. They lead the Big Ten in scoring at 86.5 points per game, which is crazy. They're the best three-point shooting team in the Big Ten at 39% from 3. They make 10 threes a game, which is the highest mark in the Big Ten. It's not like they're shooting 39% because they don't take very many threes. Oh, no, the volume is there. Okay, when you play a team that can shoot the basketball as well as Iowa does, you are always in danger of losing. Just ask Indiana. They went down there and got their doors blown off because Iowa shot 47% from three in that game. It's just the reality of it. And it's even a little more scary when you're going on the road because teams tend to shoot the ball a little bit better at home. The one thing, though, that's working against Iowa and in the favor of Purdue is they also allow the most amount of points per game in the Big Ten. They are a bad defensive team. Okay, if I bet this game, because I'm not too sure that I will, I'm not going to bet, Purdue minus 7.5, because like I said, maybe Iowa gets hot and the game goes down to the wire. I'm not going to bet Iowa plus 7.5 because maybe they don't get hot and they lose by 30. But if I do bet this game, I'm betting the over 153.5. Purdue's going to score a lot of points. This is a good offensive team that can score inside and outside. You got Trey Kaufman-Renn. I mean, if he plays the way he did against IU, I mean, he's going to be pretty dominant. He's going to go and get a bucket whenever Purdue needs it. You got Braden Smith, who scored 24 points. They got a ton of shooting. I'd like to think that water finds its level and they actually knock in some of those open threes that they missed against Indiana. Okay, so Purdue is going to score a lot of points. I think Iowa's going to score a lot of points as well, not just because they average 86.5 points per game, but because the one thing that Purdue's defense is really, I'm not going to say built on, but relies on is the ability to turn their opponent over. Iowa does not turn the ball over. They average a little over 10 turnovers per game. That's not very many. It's not very many. And that's been Purdue's defensive calling card as of late. And they've done a great job turning teams over. Indiana had 20 turnovers on Friday night. Michigan had 22 turnovers when they played Purdue. Ohio State had 18. Oregon had 16. Those are all in Purdue's last 4 games. They have done just an excellent job of, applying pressure on the ball and turning the other team over. Matt Painter, when he was on Dan's show last week, made a great point talking about how, Braden Smith has excellent instincts. And because of that, he's able to help force these turnovers. And when you look at, just the rest of this team, the other guards that come in and play, look, Fletcher Lawyer, he's just not athletic enough to really pressure the ball. But CJ Cox and Miles Colvin and Jakari Harris are. Like CJ Cox, his insertion into the starting lineup, I think has really helped this team defensively because he can pick up full court. He's athletic enough to stay in front of guys. He does an excellent job creating pressure on the ball, and it's part of why Purdue started to force all of these turnovers. With Iowa, though, like that's, they don't turn the ball over a ton. 10 turnovers per game. That's the second best mark in the Big Ten. Okay, so Purdue's going to have their work cut out for them defensively. They aren't turnover dependent, but it is a big part of their defense. Okay, the good news, though, for Purdue and why it's important for them to force turnovers is because they're just not a great rebounding team. They're just a little smaller, so it's tough to get in there and rebound. The good news for them is if they don't force turnovers, they shouldn't be out-possessioned because Iowa's, not only the worst defensive team in the Big Ten, but they're the worst rebounding team in the Big Ten. They have a rebounding differential on the season of an average of negative 5.4. One of the biggest concerns about Purdue when they played Indiana, and really when they play anybody, is can they rebound? Because there's not a ton of size there. That should not be a worry tonight. Shouldn't be a worry. They should be able to do just fine on the glass. Okay, so, they're going to be fine there. Braden Smith and Trey Kaufman-Renn should have their way on offense because Iowa's just absolutely atrocious on that side of the ball. They just don't really practice defense, clearly. So for Purdue to win tonight, they had to avoid turning the ball over. They can rebound at a pretty basic level. And if they can just, commit to playing defense for the full shot clock, because they're not going to force a million turnovers in this game, then they should win. Okay, this is a game that Purdue should win. They're 7.5-point favorites. But, as it is always a concern, You're playing Iowa, when you're playing a team that shoots the ball so incredibly well from three, you're always in danger of losing. That's just the reality of it. So they've got their work cut out for them. Indiana definitely has their work cut out for them. And we'll see how it goes. Can Indiana find a way to bounce back? Because look, like they're still hovering around. Like they could still make the tournament. Okay, you win tonight, you beat Michigan on Saturday. Your resume looks so much better. Or if you win tonight, you lose to Michigan on Saturday, and then you go beat Michigan State next week. Your resume looks pretty freaking great. It just does. So Indiana, you're not out of it quite yet, but you got to figure it out, man. They've blown two games back to back late. Like just imagine, like are we freaking out about Mike Woodson and the rest of this season if they beat Wisconsin and they figure out how to not give the ball to Myles Rice with the game on the line, and let's say Galloway makes a play, all of a sudden you're 16-6. With back-to-back really good wins, because Maryland's a good basketball team. We all know how great Purdue has been this season. But look, close doesn't cut it. Close but no cigar, which is really disappointing for Mike Woodson because he loves his cigars. But, he didn't get it because he was just close. He didn't win. Speaking of being close, we've been told how close the Colts are, every offseason except for this last one. Chris Ballard finally owned up to it. It was like, you know what? We're not close. And so major adjustments need to be made. And there's one that they can make right now. They could make this adjustment today. Question is, do they have the balls to do it? What move am I talking about? I'll tell you when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
Unadulterated sports talk with unfiltered takes. It's the real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket. 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
The real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket. Thanks for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in, whether that's YouTube, Indy Sports Ticket. If you want to head over there, subscribe, watch the live stream there, jump in the chat, be part of the conversation. You can also watch on Twitter at _ Jonathan Smith if you want to follow me and watch there. At Ticket1430 if you want all the updates on my show and Dan's show. You can also listen via that Indy Sports Ticket app, which you can get wherever you download your app. So the Colts, they're close. Remember? We're so close, so incredibly close, which isn't true, right? They are a long way away. And I have a way for them to get just like a little bit closer. Okay. Not saying that they're going to go to the Super Bowl if they make this move, but they'll be better. They should be able to make the playoffs. Myles Garrett requested a trade from the Browns yesterday, and the Colts should undoubtedly go and trade for him. What has been the calling card of Chris Ballard in his NFL drafts? What is the thing that he repeatedly uses high picks on? Edge rushers. What do the Colts not have? A dominant edge rusher. Quit spending first-round picks on these guys. Instead, trade away your first-round pick and go get Myles Garrett. Proven commodities are always better than unknown commodities. It's part of why, if you talk to college coaches now, seniors in high school are under-recruited because all these coaches are wanting to recruit the transfer portal because they've seen, let's just say you're a football coach, like you've seen that football player play at the collegiate level and you have some idea of how good they are and how good they can be. It's why Curt Cignetti wants to go out and get experienced quarterbacks in the transfer portal as opposed to bringing in a young freshman and coaching him up, right? You want to know what you are getting. Simple as that. Okay, proven commodities are better than unknown commodities. And Myles Garrett is as proven as they come. A dominant edge rusher who consistently gets after the quarterback. Okay, it's the exact same thing in the NFL. You want guys that can play, right? And I'm sure there's some Colts fanboys out there that are like, well, what about Leatu Latu? What do we do with him? We just spent the 15th overall pick on him. We don't know how good he's going to be. And honestly, I wouldn't be opposed to trading like Leatu Latu and a third-round pick or a second-round pick for Myles Garrett. Okay? Because chances are Leatu Latu is not going to be as good as Myles Garrett. We don't know how good he's going to be. He could be another Kwity Paye where he's just, a solid option coming off the edge, going to hover around 8 sacks a year, which is, top 25 in the NFL usually. So like that's a possibility. He could just be a solid edge rusher. Or he could be out of the league in 2 years. Or he could be as good as Myles Garrett. But I'm going to bet that he's not going to be as good as Myles Garrett. Say, well, Jonathan, why are you making that bet? Because if he had the potential to be as good as Myles Garrett, he would not have gone 15th overall. He would have gone in the top 5. Okay? So, Chris Ballard, Shane Steichen, move Leatu Latu and a second-round pick to the Browns and bring in one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. Right? And I think that this would be the best thing for Chris Ballard. Seriously. It'd be the best thing for him. He would actually be allowed to laugh at the press conference and say that he got one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. It'd be great. It would be great. And like I wouldn't be able to laugh at him. No one would be able to laugh at him because it's true. Go get this proven commodity. He raises your floor immediately. Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen are hopefully coaching or, working or fighting for their jobs this next season. And they need better players. Okay, we can talk about competition and development and all these things. That's great. But if you don't have good players, you're not winning games. Myles Garrett makes this defense and everyone else on it better immediately. It immediately happens. He can get after the quarterback, which means that, Jalen Jones and Samuel Womack, the third, don't have to cover as long. Okay. He demands a double team by the opposing offensive line, which means everyone else gets single coverage. Say what you want about Defoe, about DeForest Buckner, but I wouldn't want to block that guy one-on-one, even if he is a little bit older now. He's 30. Okay, he would immediately raise the floor of the Colts, and that is what they need, because especially on defense, You say, well, why especially on defense? Because, look, it's either going to be Anthony Richardson at quarterback, some rookie that they take in like the third round, Quinn Ewers, even though there's maybe Jackson Dart, because there's murmurs now that Jackson Dart could go in the first round. Apparently, he really impressed at the Senior Bowl. So no matter who's playing quarterback next year, whether it's Richardson, some rookie, Sam Darnold, whoever it is, like the defense is going to have to be the thing that wins Colts games this next season, because whoever's playing quarterback probably isn't going to be great. Right? They're not going to be able to put the team on their back for 4 quarters and go make it happen. Like, the defense has to be better this next year if the Colts want to win games. And they took a step in the right direction by going out and firing Gus Bradley and bringing in the mad scientist Lou Anarumo. They need the players, though, on the defensive side of the football. That is what they need. Okay, that's what Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen need if they want to keep their jobs. Right? And look, maybe Leatu Latu turns out to be great. Maybe he does. But that shouldn't matter to Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen right now. Because if they don't win this year, they won't be around to see how good Leatu Latu is. Okay, and Myles Garrett, he's not an old player. He's not a young player either. He's 29, right? So he's probably got four good years left, right? He's going to be dominant for a few more years. So they'll have time to find another pass rusher, to hopefully, that Myles Garrett can kind of pass it on to by the time he's done. Okay, so go get him. He makes you better right now. And the Colts need to be better right now if guys like Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen want to keep their jobs. If the Colts are serious about making the playoffs, and if Chris Ballard really thinks his job just might be in jeopardy, then we'll see him go out and try to make a deal. That's the reality of it. All right? He's got to do something to make this team better right now. And I just have a really hard time believing that, he's going to hit on all 7 draft picks and the Colts are going to be way better because of that. So if the Colts are serious, if they really want to make the playoffs, if they really want to do all these things, then, they got to make a shake a little bit. They got to go and make a deal. They got to bring in a guy who really wants to win, because that's why Myles Garrett wants out of Cleveland. He wants to win. He's a tough dude who's going to show up in big spots when you need him to. That's the reality of it. Speaking of being tough, the Indiana Pacers are tough, man. That's a tough basketball team, and they showed it last night. No Miles Turner, the anchor of that defense. Didn't matter. They still got stops. Well, Jonathan, they played the Jazz. Yeah, they did. They won, though. That's all that really matters. They beat the Jazz 112-111 last night. And what's really impressive is the Pacers had no business winning that game. No business whatsoever. They were out-rebounded 60-37. They got out-rebounded by 23. 23. Usually, if you get out-rebounded by 23, you lose. The Jazz made more threes than the Pacers. They shot 35% from beyond the arc to the Pacers 24%. The Jazz also shot 10 more free throws than the Pacers. Outscored them by 4 points at the foul line. Usually, when you get out-rebounded, when you get outscored from the three-point line, and you get outscored from the free throw line, you lose. Like, that is a bad combination of things to have happen. It is. And last year, the Pacers would not have won that game. Not a chance. But the Pacers were able to figure it out and win that game because they played great defense late. Okay, not good defense, great defense. The Jazz made 5 field goals in the final 7 minutes and 16 seconds. 2 of those shots, though, came after the game was over. After the game was over. Okay? Like, this team just kind of bared down late, and we're like, you know what, Utah Jazz, Isaiah Collier's your starting point guard. Yeah, you're not scoring. Doesn't matter that we don't have Myles Turner, the man who is 5th in the NBA in blocks this year. Doesn't matter. We're going to lock up on the perimeter, and we're going to make nothing but great plays consistently. Okay, and that's what they did. Okay, Halliburton, who is still not a great defender, not a awful one anymore. Almost said not a bad one, but there are definitely some moments where he's been bad. Okay, he just kind of in the right spot, just kind of figuring things out. He didn't shoot it great, but he was still aggressive. He took 15 shots. That's the number. When Halliburton shoots 15 shots, the Pacers tend to not lose. Okay, Jarris Walker off the bench had a night. He played so well. They played him at power forward a little bit more, and that, I think, helped him quite a bit. Guarding John Collins is just a little bit easier than guarding, some athletic small forward. Just as he shot the ball well, too. 9 points. Played really good defense. Aaron Nesmith's just a dog. An absolute dog coming off the bench. He was plus 10. That led the way for the Pacers. Ben Shepherd just did what Ben Shepherd does. He played good defense. Knocked down, or missed all 3 of his threes, but, made a layup, had there's a big swing there in the game where the Pacers hit a 3 by Obi Toppin, and then they steal the inbound, and then Ben Shepherd dunked on somebody. It was really cool. It was great. But it was just a very impressive and gritty win from the Pacers that they would not have won that game last year because they were so horrific on the defensive side of the ball. Like, if the Pacers were playing in games last year where they weren't scoring in the 120s, they were not winning. It wasn't happening. And last night, without Myles Turner, the anchor of their defense, and a very good three-point shooter this year, still having a career year from beyond the arc at like 43%, still lighting it up, they were able to find a way to win. It's impressive. They're the 4 seed right now. Okay, do you remember when they were not playing very well? They had a bunch of guys injured, and they were really struggling, and there was like some concern, and Tyrese Halliburton wasn't playing very well. He's turned a corner. He's played so much better here as of late. Now, they're sitting pretty firmly in that 4th seed. Okay, they're 2 games ahead of the Bucks, who they are better than. Okay, they're surging. The Bucks are 5-5 in their last 10. The Pacers are tied with the Toronto Raptors of all teams in terms of their record in their last 10 games at 8-2. They're still rolling. Okay, like, it is just really impressive the turnaround that we've seen from this Pacers team. Rick Carlisle has done an unbelievable job. He was the coach of the month last month. Which he fully deserved, given to the fact that the Pacers had the best record in the month of January. They are rolling. And if Siakam continues to be this efficient, because that's just what he is. Like, chalk Siakam up for 20-plus points while shooting somewhere around 50% from the floor and probably pulling in 6 or 7 rebounds. You can just go ahead and write that down every night before the game because you know that he's going to get that. Right? And Halliburton's been much more aggressive. That is just the most important thing for him, right? Go score, especially since teams are starting to play him more and more like how teams play Jokic, where it's like, you go score as many points as you want. You're not going to have 12 assists because we know that if you get 12 assists, then you're probably going to beat us, right? So because teams are starting to play Halliburton like that more and more, he has to be more aggressive. He has to be more aggressive. And we've seen that from him here as of late. It's why they've won 4 in a row. It's why they've turned things around. And it's why they're now the 4 seed. And they're probably going to host a first-round playoff series. If, and only if, they can continue to defend at this level. Okay? And for everyone concerned about, Myles Turner being traded. It's not going to happen. And we saw why last night. They clearly missed him. Thomas Bryant, former Hoosier, tough, defends, tries to defend, can knock down some jumpers, but he's not as good as Myles Turner. Like, if Thomas Bryant is your starting center in the NBA, then you need an upgraded center. And thankfully, the Indiana Pacers have that in Myles Turner. So he's not going anywhere. I know that since he was ruled out last night with the ankle, some people thought that there was a chance that he was going to be traded. The Lakers really need a center now. So, of course it's going to be Myles Turner, right? Absolutely not. That's not happening. When we come back here in about 4 minutes, there were a couple of storylines yesterday I didn't really get to because of the Luka trade and the fact that IU and Purdue played. That was 67% of the show yesterday, and then the other, 2/3 or 1/3, was the Luka trade. So there were a couple things that I missed out on. I didn't get to talk too much about the John Calipari return to Rupp. There's another NBA trade that is very important for the future of the league. I'm going to touch on that as well. So when we come back here in about 4 minutes, John Calipari gets his revenge in Rupp Arena. We'll discuss that next.
Often imitated, never duplicated. The Real Jonathan Smith Show. This is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
The Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket. Thanks for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in. Greatly appreciated. Whether you're watching on YouTube, Indy Sports Ticket, if you want to head over there and subscribe, it's free. Watch over there. Hop in the chat, be part of the conversation. That would be great. Maybe you're listening via that Indy Sports Ticket app, but you can also download wherever you get your apps. Maybe you're just listening via 1430 AM. No matter how you're listening, it is greatly appreciated. Jared Dubin of CBS Sports, also the writer over at lastnightinbasketball.com, does a great job covering both the NBA and the NFL. He's set to join here in about 15 minutes or so. We'll talk a little NBA trade stuff. Luka, obviously, there's another one as well that went through that. Was a little more normal. We'll touch on that as well, but we're going to start off by talking about John Calipari going into Rupp Arena and doing the thing that I'm so glad that he did, beating those incredibly annoying, incredibly obnoxious Kentucky fans, right? I didn't get into this a ton yesterday because, IU and Purdue game and Luka and the Luka Doncic trade, the most shocking trade in the history of the NBA. And just to be honest, like if Arkansas had lost that game Saturday, that would have been the worst sports day of my life. But they won. The Gary, Indiana native, John L. Davis, played great, 18 points, six assists. Finally had a game where he just shot the ball well. He's been coming back from that wrist injury. So he struggled a little bit, but he finally got his stuff together, and he played really well. And, that's the thing with Cal, man. Coach Calipari. Players really love him, and you knew that they were going to play hard for him on Saturday night. And they did. All three of the former Kentucky players balled out, played at a super high level. Wagner scores like 17 points in the second half. Adu Thero, one of the most improved players in the country, scores like 21. Ivisic lights it up from three. And I'm just so glad for John Calipari because he's an all-time great college basketball coach. And I'm sure, we got Seth Greenberg coming on Dan's show today at 1:30. He's, I'm sure that he'll get into this as well, but he's an all-time great college basketball coach. He's taken three different schools to the Final Four. One of those schools was UMass. That speaks to the level of coach that John Calipari is. He's excellent. And yes, he lost some games that he shouldn't have in the NCAA tournament at Kentucky that he should have won. Well, you know who else has done that? Matt Painter, and he's still an excellent head coach. It's almost like the entire nature of March Madness is teams losing games that they shouldn't. Okay? It happens. It happens. Okay? With that being said, as excellent of a coach as John Calipari is, I do find him very annoying. I just do. Like when he does his press conferences, he only talks about himself. It's a lot of I stuff. Some of the stuff that he says is really weird. It's just, it is. Like I can't even describe it really, but he'll say things just like, why would you say that? With that being said, he's got class and all those things, didn't wring Kentucky out to dry. You could tell he really loved his time there and all those things, but he's a little annoying sometimes. With that being said, even if I wasn't an Arkansas fan, I think I'd be really happy for him. Because anytime you get run out of town after winning a lot and doing positive things, and you return to being booed and being an 11.5-point underdog, and they sell out the arena to watch you come in and lose, but then you win by double digits. That's awesome. It is. It's a great story, and seeing Kentucky fans melt over losing to Arkansas and John Calipari is just the best thing ever. Kentucky fans are the absolute worst, and they deserve to lose every game that they play. A team, though, that deserves to win every game that they play is the San Antonio Spurs. Okay? Great trade by the Spurs over the weekend that was overshadowed by the Luka trade. De'Aaron Fox to the Spurs. Look, I think that there's two things that you have to do with generational talents, because Victor Wembanyama is that. One is not trade them away when you get them, like the Dallas Mavericks did with Luka Doncic. I know he's a little overweight. I don't care. He took you to the finals last year. What's Dan saying? Oh, that's right. Don't F with winning. And the Mavericks just did that by getting rid of their best player who led to them doing all of the winning. But hey, it's whatever. It's already happened. The second thing, though, that you have to do when you acquire these generational talents is you have to maximize every single year that you have with them. Okay, the Spurs are doing that with Victor Wembanyama by adding De'Aaron Fox. They now have a legitimate star alongside a player that could be the best player in the world soon. A guy at 20 years old who's already one of the 10 best players in the world. Okay, this is what you do with young stars. Okay, you bring in Chris Paul, right, who I'm sure is really, because the Spurs are really young, like having 40-year-old Chris Paul who's seen everything, is helping them. You don't trade them away because they're a little pudgy. Okay, you surround them with players that can help them. And, if you watched the Spurs last year, like I did, because Wemby's just fascinating, the Spurs had guards last year who couldn't make a post-entry pass, which is incredible. The fact that we got NBA players that can't make a simple post-entry pass. It's fascinating, right? So they had these guards that couldn't get Wemby the ball. So what'd they do? They went and they got Chris Paul in free agency. And they added De'Aaron Fox, who's only 27. He's going to be around for the next decade. A guy, De'Aaron Fox, who's a fringe all-star every single year. A guy who's going to help them play a little bit faster. A guy who is going to demand attention from the defense, even though most of the attention will still be on Wemby because he's still the best player on that team. De'Aaron Fox is amongst the second-tier level of point guards in the NBA, and he will continue to be that for the next 5 or 6 years. Okay? This is what you do with young stars. You bring in guys to help them be better. The Pacers did it here. They had a star in Tyrese Halliburton, a guy who was third team all in NBA last year, which means he was one of the 15 best players in the NBA last year. And the Pacers recognized, hey, this dude's not just like a nice piece. He's a legitimately good player. Let's go get Pascal Siakam. Let's pair them together because we think that they'll be a good fit, right? And Pascal Siakam will take some of that attention away from Halliburton. Okay, that is what you do with young stars, with young players in general that you want to become good stars. I don't know if you caught this yesterday, but the Los Angeles Rams informed Cooper Kupp that they're going to trade him. They're like, hey man, we appreciate your service, but we're going to move on from you. Cooper Kupp was like, but I would like to stay. And they were like, too bad, we're going to trade you anyway. I spoke earlier about how the Colts should go get Myles Garrett to help raise the floor of that defense. The Colts should go get Cooper Kupp. Go get a legitimately proven wide receiver. Okay, Josh Downs going into year 3, nice slot receiver. Michael Pittman Jr., solidified good outside wide receiver. Go get Cooper Kupp. Okay, let's not rely on A.D. Mitchell to develop. Let's not, rely on Alec Pierce to develop. Because, yes, Alec Pierce played well this last year, but he ran in a straight line down the field, and Anthony Richardson threw it as far as he could, okay? Go get a guy in Cooper Kupp who can help Anthony Richardson. That is what organizations should do with young stars. And the Spurs are they're putting on a clinic, right? And they've been doing it ever, for the last, 30 years now, going back to when they had the Admiral and then Tim Duncan. And then they were like, oh, let's go get Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili and all these other guys. Okay, the Spurs have always done an excellent job of this. And because of that, they are going to contend probably after this year for the next decade because they have a guy in Victor Wembanyama who's a generational guy or a guy who's probably going to be the next face of the NBA, a guy who's going to be the best player in the world probably within the next 5 years. Okay, so they have that, which is the most important thing if you want to contend. But they also have a front office group that knows how to surround him with talent, right? That's something that the Mavericks have failed to do. That's something that the Colts have failed to do. Okay, sure, they tried to go get A.D. Mitchell to help out Anthony Richardson. I don't know. Once again, going back to what I said earlier, go get proven commodities. Go get proven commodities. Go get guys that you know can play and that you know can help your team. That's what the Spurs did. That's what, the Colts should be doing this offseason, but we'll see whether or not they do that. Jared Dubin set to join the show coming up here in about 7 minutes or so. Writer over at CBSSports.com. He covers the NFL for them, and then he covers basketball on his own over at Last Night in Basketball.com. Before we head to break, in case you missed this, Pat Hoberg, and a Major League Baseball umpire, was just fired yesterday for sharing a betting account with a pro poker player. Jesse Rogers, he's the one who reported this. There was apparently no evidence that Pat Hoberg, an umpire, gambled or impacted the outcome of any games. But when you're sharing a gambling account with someone who's making bets on Major League Baseball, the worst is going to be assumed of you, and rightfully so. So now, in the last week, we have two separate gambling issues. The NBA has their issue with Terry Rozier, who's being investigated for maybe throwing some games, right? A Major League Baseball umpire just got canned for being in a gambling-related thing. Where's the NFL's big gambling issue? Like, they've had some small ones. Some players have been suspended for it, but they haven't had a big one yet. Like, the Michael Porter Jr.'s brother, his scandal was pretty big. The Major League Baseball, Shohei Ohtani's interpreter, that gambling incident was pretty big. And now they have an umpire that they had to fire. Talking more about the NBA, Tim Donaghy in 2007 fixed games for the NBA. Where's the NFL one at? It's got to be coming down the pipe here at some point. There are too many players, too many coaches, too many officials involved in this for someone to not be fixing or throwing games in some way, shape, or form. I am not a conspiracy theorist. That is not my thing. I despise them. Really, I do. I find most of them to be absurd. But it's got to be coming down the pipe for the NFL at some point, you would think. There's just too many hands in that large NFL-sized pot for nothing to be happening. Okay, so we'll see what winds up happening. Jared Dubin, he's going to join the show coming up here in 5 minutes. We're going to talk the Luka trade. We're going to talk the Super Bowl, and we'll probably talk a little bit about the De'Aaron Fox trade as well. So just a lot of stuff to get to. Jared Dubin is set to join the show coming up here in about 4.5 minutes.
It's time for the real Jonathan Smith Show. This is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
The real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket. Thanks for tuning in. It is greatly appreciated. Jared Dubin of CBS Sports, where he covers the NFL, also covers the NBA over at lastnightinbasketball.com. He joins the show. Jared, what's going on, man?
Not too much, man. How are you?
I'm all right. A lot better than I was 24 hours ago. As you and my audience know, I am a Mavericks fan. So I just want to jump straight into this. What were your thoughts when the Luka trade happened?
I mean, I can't curse on your air, I assume. So
you cannot.
My actual thoughts will probably have to stay in my head, but that's pretty much where I was at. My immediate second thought was, okay, Shams was hacked. My third thought was, no, he had to have been hacked. He's out there saying, no, this is real. And then, I mean, I just don't understand how you can do this. Like, there are very few justifications in my mind that make any sense for trading a 25-year-old who is a 5-time first-team All-NBA player. There are only, I think, 4 other players active that are 5-time first-team All-NBA guys, and all of them are 30 and older. Luka's done it 5 years in a row. He is arguably the best scorer in the league, arguably the best passer in the league. Like, I don't care if this guy weighs 370 pounds, not 270. You just don't do this. Like, even despite all of the issues that you apparently have with him, he's one of the 5 best players in the world. And there's got to be a way to work things out beyond that. And then even if you are going to trade him, I don't understand only keeping the bidding to one team. And I don't understand doing it now when you could do it this offseason or after signing him to an extension when you can really open it up to everybody else, because there's no way for him to like start pushing to get out with 7 years left on his contract.
Yeah, I completely agree. Joined by Jared Dubin, who covers the NFL over at CBSSports.com and covers the NBA over at lastnightinbasketball.com. I'm with you. They should have opened up the bidding. I talked to some people who know what's going on, and they were like, yeah, like they should have just called the Spurs and been like, can we have all your picks and Stephon Castle or something like that? And they probably would have said yes, because it's Luka freaking Doncic.
The Thunder, the Rockets, there are so many teams that you could have called.
And you know, they get back a guy in Anthony Davis, who's a good player. I know, you know, some people said some outlandish things like Stephen A. Smith saying that they were his 1 seed now, which is absurd. My thing is, like, before Anthony Davis got to LA, he never really won anything. Before Kyrie Irving, you know, was paired up with LeBron James, he never really won anything either. What is the Mavs ceiling with those two guys leading the charge for them now?
It's a good question. I haven't specifically thought about anything related to like what the ceiling of the team is. I think that the defense certainly is going to be better. My concern is whether Davis, who is like an absolutely fantastic defender, one of the, you know, 5 or so best defenders in the league, but he's been that player for the Lakers for these last couple of years, and their defense hasn't been all that great. So my concern is that he is an elite defender, but maybe not a guy who is a defense unto himself. Like you see every year that Rudy Gobert is in the league, his team is a top 5, top 10 defense at worst. That's not been the case with Anthony Davis for some reason. And I don't know what that reason is necessarily. So unless they can break into that top 10 defenses and ideally top 5 defenses, like based on what you did in this trade, you need to be a top 5 defense at worst, if not the best defense in the league. And I don't know if I necessarily see it, especially you're going to have guys playing, you know, up the positional line or down the positional line a little bit. Like you're going to have PJ Washington exclusively guarding wings at this point. Kyrie's going to have to take on some tough defensive matchups. Clay is going to have to play defense better than he has since his injuries. Like it's tough for me to see that top 5 defense, number 1 defense especially out there. And then I'm the offense. I'm not worried necessarily, but I do think there are going to be some issues. Like when you look at the way a lot of these guys have played since they got to Dallas, like PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively, so much of that is attributable to the way Luka Doncic plays basketball. And that's obviously not going to be happening for this team anymore. So I just don't know how everything else works.
I don't either. I don't have any clue whatsoever. Joined by Jared Dubin, who covers the NFL over at CBSSports.com and covers the NBA at lastnightinbasketball.com, talking about Luka being traded to the Lakers. I don't know how any of it works either, because when you look at all of the moves from the Mavericks in the offseason, they were designed to help Luka, like bringing in, Grimes and bringing in Najee Marshall and making the trade for PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford and bringing in Klay Thompson. It was all designed to revolve around Luka, and now he's not there. And I just don't think that Kyrie Irving trying to do a cheap Luka impression is really going to work out all that well. Your points on the defense, I think, are spot on. Like, Klay Thompson's not the defender that he was, 6 years ago, and Kyrie Irving's not a great defender. And there's just a lot of issues. Like, I
do want to give Kyrie some credit. When he really locks in, he plays really good defense. It's just you're now asking so much of him on the offensive side that it's hard to see that happening with a high degree of consistency. And you don't want Kyrie doing a Luka impersonation. You want Kyrie doing what Kyrie does best.
Yeah, I completely agree. The ball's going to be in his hands so much more, and he's a very he's Kyrie Irving. Like, he's a great offensive player. I don't want to make it sound like I'm saying he's bad or anything like that, but I just feel like they got worse. That's kind of my feeling about it. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that there are very many scenarios where you trade a top 5 player in the league and you get better. It's really hard for me to see how that would happen.
What a concept. Who would have thought about that? It's crazy. What has to happen, though, for the Mavericks to, I guess, not regret making this trade?
I guess it depends from whose perspective you're asking about it. I don't think the fans will really ever forgive them. I can't see a scenario where that happens. From Nico Harrison's perspective, like, they're going to have to win quite a bit for him to be not vilified in the way he's been for these last few days. I guess from the perspective of ownership, it's whether they get those casino deals that they're looking for. That's about it.
Yeah. Joined by Jared Dubin, who covers the NBA over at lastnightinbasketball.com, writes just awesome stuff over there. He also covers the NFL over at cbssports.com. So part of why the Mavs moved Luka was there was concern about weight and conditioning, and there's I guess a Joel Embiid-like concern of his body's not going to hold up. Like, what are the chances that really happens?
I mean, it's a lot different for a 7'1", 300-pound guy who came into the league not being able to play his first 2 seasons because of various lower body injuries than it is for like a 6'7" wing, even if he's getting up into the 260s or 270s, whose biggest issue has been like calf strains. Like, I don't buy it. He certainly doesn't have the kind of injury history that Embiid does. It doesn't seem like really anything all that close to me. Are there concerns about his weight and his conditioning and his willingness to put in the work to be a super highly conditioned athlete? Like, yeah, that's been going around for a while. They haven't been shy about that. When I remember in the finals, Brian Windhorst kind of went off on him, and he was talking about on his podcast the other day, nobody in the Dallas organization pushed back on that to him. So clearly they had concerns about it too, but I don't see how that justifies this. Like, the guy, despite all of those concerns, has been one of the 5 best players in the world for 5 years. Like, he has been first team All-NBA 5 years in a row in his ages 20 to 24 seasons. He's 25 years old. Like, I just don't get it.
I don't either. I had a guy yesterday on from Dallas, and he made the comparison to Dirk. Like, when Dirk showed up in the United States, like, he was kind of frail, and it took him some time to kind of figure out, oh, I need to like work out and bulk up a little bit. Sometimes it just takes guys some time. Like if Luka was 28 and they wanted to do this, and the issue was still pretty prominent, that's a little more understandable. But to do it at 25 just doesn't make any sense. While the Mavericks are getting rid of generational talents, the Spurs are doing the correct thing, and they're helping theirs. What'd you make of De'Aaron Fox going to the Spurs?
I really like the Spurs doing this, especially without giving up basically any of their best assets. They hung on to Stephon Castle. They hung on to Devin Vassell. They hung on to Jeremy Sohan. They hung on to all of the draft picks that they're owed by the Hawks. They hung on to even the 2031 swap that they have with the Kings on their first-round pick. and they got a guy who is going to give them really good point guard play for the next 5-6 years. And I think that's something you saw last season, how terrible they were basically whenever Trey Jones wasn't on the floor. And the fact that Trey Jones, who was like a baseline level rotation point guard, made that much of a difference next to Victor Wembanyama tells you a lot. And you see how well they played this year with Chris Paul next to Wembanyama, and then the difference when he hasn't been on the court. I mean, to be able to have even competent level point guard play around him is apparently really, really, really big. And when you get better than that, and the way Fox can test defenses with his speed, with his ability to shoot from the 18 to 20 or so foot range off the dribble and pick and rolls, like that's just such a different test for defenses than what they're going to be able to handle based on Wembanyama being out there, because this guy is shooting like the 5th longest threes in the league, and he's 7'4" alien. Like it's I like what they were able to do, and I like the cost at which they were able to do it.
Joined by Jared Dubin, who covers the NFL over at CBSSports.com and covers the NBA at lastnightinbasketball.com. You can check him out on Twitter at JADubin05. So the Warriors are making a lot of phone calls trying to pair someone with Steph Curry. If they're able to do it, who do you think it's going to be?
Oh, man, I wish I do. Yeah, I mean, I don't know who I think it would be. I'm more interested in how it works when we know who it is. I'm down at the Super Bowl, so I'm not necessarily talking about talking to all my different people about trades right now. That'll probably come in a couple more days. But yeah, I mean, I think that Kevin Durant obviously was someone that they were apparently talking about. That would be a lot more interesting to me than Jimmy Butler. I don't think that the LeBron thing is going to happen. I know they pushed at the last year's deadline, but LeBron loves Luka and has been extremely open about that. I don't see him being like, okay, get me out of here now that Anthony Davis is done.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it'll be LeBron. I want it to be Kevin Durant so badly, but it doesn't seem like the Suns are wanting to budge on that. We'll see, because I mean the Warriors are desperate. Like, I feel like every time I get on Twitter, there's a report about how they're calling literally everybody. Since you're down, you're at the Super Bowl in New Orleans. There's like, I've read a lot of things, and like Twitter isn't everybody, and I try to remember that. But it seems like there's not as much excitement for the Super Bowl as there has been in years past. Are you are you in that same boat?
We were talking about this last night because the Chiefs went second at media night, and the first team always has more people there because all of the people that are just there for bits, they get there during the first session, and for the most part, a lot of the bits only people are done after that first session, and it's less crowded for the second one. But I don't remember it being like this not crowded. Granted, some of that was because they had Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce next to each other at their stands, so everybody else seemed empty in comparison. Like, I was standing over there talking to Trent McDuffie with 4 other people, which is pretty crazy for opening night. But I mean, I just think naturally there's going to be less excitement. Like, it's the same team from the AFC for the 3rd year in a row, and they're playing the same team from the NFC for the 2nd time in 3 years. There are obviously some new players on each team, particularly Philly, but how many times have we heard about Saquon Barkley this season? It's not like there's anything new happening here that people don't know about.
Yeah, that's a great point. 4 people. That's crazy. Joined by Jared Dubin, NFL writer over at CBSSports.com. He's down. He's in New Orleans. Also covers the NBA over at Last Night in basketball.com. So what about you personally? Like, do you have Chiefs fatigue?
No. I love seeing the greatest players do their thing at the highest level. I love seeing teams sort of be the best version of themselves and have other teams try to step their game up to meet them. This team is so good and has been so good for so long that seeing them continue to do their thing is pretty thrilling to me. And I mean, anytime somebody beats them, it's incredible. Like, just look at what we thought of that Bengals team a few years ago, or that Bucs team that beat them in the Super Bowl, or even the Patriots team that beat them in the first AFC title game. Like, it's when you have a team like this and somebody is actually able to knock them off, it's an incredible story. It's an incredible thing to watch just because it's so shocking as it's happening. And I mean, if that happens, what day is today? It's Tuesday. Okay.
Yes.
If that happens 5 days from now, that That would be pretty incredible. And obviously, if the Chiefs are able to become the first team ever to three-peat, that would be pretty incredible too.
It would be. I'm glad you brought up the three-peat. Like there's already arguments being made for Mahomes being the best quarterback ever. I'm like, Tom Brady's got 7 Super Bowls, which is more than every other franchise. So I don't know about that. But if the Chiefs completed the three-peat, I would be much more receptive and probably will make the argument for Andy Reid to be the best NFL coach ever. Do you and play for him, or is it still Belichick?
I mean, I think it's probably something that's in play, right? Like you come and win 3 in a row, you win 4 5? Yeah, no, 4 total. Like you're working your way up there. He is essentially the Bill Belichick of the offensive side of the ball of their generation of coaches. You could certainly make an argument. Obviously, he's been doing it at an even higher level over these last several years. Like the post-Brady years didn't go particularly well for Belichick. Certainly not as well as the pre-Mahomes years went for Andy Reid. Obviously, no Super Bowls was the same, but Andy Reid had a ton of success in Philadelphia and even in Kansas City before Mahomes got there. Like they won the division 2 years in a row before Mahomes took over at quarterback. They're on a 9-year streak now, and 7 of those have been Mahomes. So, I mean, I think you can make an argument.
Yeah, I completely agree. Joined by Jared Dubin, covers the NFL over at CBSSports.com, covers the NBA at Last Night and Basketball.com. Last question for you, Jared. Who do you like on Sunday night?
I'm taking the Chiefs. Like, I'm taking them until somebody beats them. I've been talking about that since the start of, last season when, stupidly 2 years ago, I was like, hey, I'm going to pick the Bills because that's trendy this year. I'm taking the Chiefs in every playoff game until somebody beats them.
I love that you took them because I've heard, other talking heads be like, I'm not betting against the Chiefs. And sure enough, they pick the Bills and they live to regret it. And that's, because that's just, I wonder why people do that. Like, why do people talk themselves into these other teams? Is it just you're bored? Do you just want to be different? I don't get it. Because I'm with you. I'm taking the Chiefs.
I can't speak to other people's psychology. I'll have to talk to my therapist about my own.
Sounds good. Jared, thanks for your time, man, as always.
Thanks for having me.
See ya. That is Jared Dubin. You can check out all of his stuff. Follow him on Twitter at JADubin05. Does a great job covering the NBA. He's an excellent writer, so his stuff at lastnightbasketball.com is great, and his stuff over at CBSSports.com is pretty great as well. Something that's not great, however, is Indiana basketball. Their disappointing season will probably continue tonight. My thoughts on their game against Wisconsin when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
Unfiltered takes live here. The real Jonathan Smith Show. This is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
The real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket. Hopefully you're having a nice week. I know I am. Just chilling. Not really. It's all right. I've had better weeks than this, but it's only Tuesday. So there's plenty of time for us to get things going. So Indiana, there's still time for them to get things going. All right, yes, they're on the outside looking in. But they can win tonight. That is a big win for their resume. And then if they can turn around on Saturday, 1 o'clock, CBS, and if they can beat Michigan, they're in a great spot to make the tournament. Okay, if they can win 2 of these next 3, even if they lose tonight, and then they beat Michigan and Michigan State, that puts them in a much, much, much better position. It gets momentum rolling, and then we'll kind of see what they can do down the stretch and into the Big Ten tournament. But, man, if they won tonight, it would be such a help for multiple reasons. First and foremost, obviously, the resume to get into the NCAA tournament becomes way better. But you also get this monkey off your back. Indiana hasn't won on the road at Wisconsin in my lifetime. I'm 25 years old. Okay, they haven't won on the road in Wisconsin since 1998. Andre Patterson was the leading scorer in that game with 23 points. The last time Indiana won at Wisconsin, Dick Bennett, father of now retired Virginia head coach Tony Bennett. Dick Bennett was the head coach of Wisconsin that year. January 25th, 1998. That is the last time Indiana won at Wisconsin. Titanic was the number 1 movie in theaters. Truly Lovely Deeply by Savage Garden. Don't even know what that band is. That was the number 1 song in America. Bill Clinton's issues were starting to surface. The Broncos and John Elway beat the Packers and Brett Favre in the Super Bowl. Why am I telling you this? Just to emphasize that it's been a long time since Indiana won there. Also, I hadn't even been conceived yet. So just crazy. It's been 27 years. And it'll be 28 years after tonight. There is absolutely no way that the Indiana Hoosiers are going into Wisconsin and winning this game. Okay? They are not going in there. I'm not betting on them. No way. Omar Ballo is a cancer to this team. Okay? He's cancer. Right? You know, when your best player has a bad attitude and he calls other dudes out and he doesn't take responsibility for giving up, 23 points to Trey Kaufman-Renn, then that guy's an issue. Okay? He is an issue. And I'm not betting on teams where their best player is an issue. Okay? I'm just not. Right? He, rings out Myles Rice in front of everybody during that game against Purdue. And then he storms off the floor, doesn't shake hands. Shout out Trey Kaufman-Renn for being petty, for stepping out of the handshake line to make sure that he got to dap up Omar Ballo after he gave him 23 points, including the game winner right in his face. Speaking of Purdue and Trey Kaufman-Renn and that great game that happened on Friday night, why did Indiana have a chance to win that game? It was because Mackenzie Mbako and Trey Galloway both played out of their minds. Mackenzie Mbako's 25 points ties his second highest scoring output for the season. Trey Galloway's 15 points was his second highest scoring output of the season as well. And I'm sorry, I just don't think you're getting that from those 2 players again. Trey Galloway has scored in double figures 9 times in 22 games this year. He's only had back-to-back double-digit scoring games once. I don't think he's going to have back-to-back double-digit scoring games against Purdue and Wisconsin. He's bound to have a bad game between one of these 2, or just a lack of aggression in one of these 2 games, because that, I think, is really more the issue with Trey Galloway. So I doubt that he repeats his performance that he had against Purdue. Mackenzie Mbako, he might keep it rolling. He's played 3 games in a row now. He scored 20 or more in 2 of his last 3. And the one game he didn't score 20, he scored 16, was hyper efficient in all 3 of these games. Over Mackenzie Mbako's last 3 games, he's shooting 58% from the floor. But before that, he was pretty inconsistent. So even if he plays well, let's say Mackenzie Mbako keeps it rolling. He scores 20 points, shoots like 52% from the floor. Okay, another good game from him. Who's going to offer the support on the offensive end? Because you have to have another scorer. Indiana has to have another guy fill it up because Wisconsin is putting up over 80 points per game on average. Okay, Indiana has to have another player score besides Mackenzie Mbako. Like, do you really think that Luke Goody is just going to light it up tonight? I don't. Do you trust Omar Ballo to be engaged and dominate at the level that he's capable of? Malik Renew had like one good stretch against Maryland since he's returned from that right knee or right ankle injury, whatever it was. Like, he hasn't been good. He struggled. He fouled out in 8 minutes against Purdue. Do you really trust anyone else on this Indiana basketball team to show up and play a good game? I do not. Myles Rice, definitely not. Right? I don't trust any of these dudes. And why would I? Why would you? They haven't been a good team all year. They beat USC. Yay. Who cares? Like why in the world should anyone think that they're going to play a good 40 minutes on the road, in a place where they haven't won in 27 years? They are 8.5-point underdogs. I'm probably going to bet on Wisconsin because Indiana is as inconsistent as they come this season. And I fully expect for them to honestly get blown out. Like this team is going to collapse at some point. Like it's going to happen. They have too many issues for it not to happen. Omar Ballo is a problem in a bad way. Okay. Myles Rice, he's frustrated and disappointed because he's not playing as well as he thought he was going to this season. Mackenzie Mbako seems pretty apathetic. He seems like he just wants to score his points and then go home. You know, who really cares about defense? Oh, but Luke Goody and Anthony Leal care. They're not holding this thing together. There's no way. Indiana's best players do not care. And that is going to be their downfall. And it's why they're going to lose tonight. And it's why they're not going to make the tournaments. It's why they may not even make the NIT. Okay? They've got too many players that simply don't care enough. And that is their single biggest issue. Now, if you want to watch a team that actually cares, Purdue plays tonight at 7, and then it's followed by Indiana at 9 o'clock. Okay? Purdue is a 7.5-point favorite on the road against Iowa tonight. Okay, Purdue is clearly better than Iowa. Okay, like it's not close. Okay, Purdue actually plays this thing called defense. If you're an Indiana Hoosiers fan, you probably haven't seen too much of that this year. But Iowa, they can beat anybody because of their style of play. They lead the Big Ten in scoring at 86.5 points per game. That's a lot of points. They're the best three-point shooting team in the Big Ten. Pretty incredible. Okay, they're shooting 39% from three on the year. They make more threes in a game than anybody else because, you can shoot a high percentage just because you don't take very many. That's not Iowa. They get them up, and they make them. Okay, they make 10 threes per game. That is the highest mark in the Big Ten. And when you play a team that can shoot the ball like this, you're always in danger of losing. Just ask Indiana. They went in there. Iowa shot like 47% from three, and they lost by 20. Okay? You're always in danger of losing when you play teams like Iowa because of how well they shoot the basketball, especially when you're on the road because teams tend to shoot the basketball better at home. The one thing working against Iowa is they don't defend anybody. Like, I think I could get a bucket against Iowa. That's how bad they are defensively. They allow the most points per game in the Big Ten. And if I bet this game, I don't know if I'm going to, I would take the over 153.5. That is the number I would bet. Purdue's going to score a lot of points because they're good offensively. They just scored 81 against IU, and they made 2 threes. Iowa, as I highlighted, they score a lot of points. They score more points than anyone else in the Big Ten Conference. They also don't turn the ball over, so they're going to score a lot of points. That has been Purdue's calling card as of late defensively. They've done a great job of turning teams over. Indiana had 20 turnovers against Purdue on Friday. In Purdue's game before that, they turned Michigan over 22 times. Their game before that, Ohio State had 18 turnovers. Oregon had 16. Those are Purdue's last 4 games. They have done an excellent job of speeding teams up and forcing turnovers, which is something that you have to do when you lack rim protection. Inserting CJ Cox into the starting lineup, playing Ja'Kari Harris and Myles Colvin a little bit more as well, has helped them do that because those three guys are athletic enough to really pressure the ball and not get blown by. Braden Smith has excellent instincts, as Matt Painter highlighted on Dan's show last week. Okay, so like they look good defensively when they're forcing turnovers. But as I said, Iowa doesn't turn the basketball over. Purdue's going to have their work cut out for them on that side of the ball. I don't think that they're going to force 20 turnovers in this game. Can they get stops in a traditional manner, and can they finish the possession with a rebound? Right? The good news for Purdue is if they don't force a ton of turnovers, they should be able to rebound effectively. Okay? They should be able to do that because Purdue's one of the worst rebounding teams in the Big Ten. Okay, they have a rebounding differential of negative 5.4. Right, they're getting pounded on the glass. This is Iowa, by the way. So for Purdue, like rebounding, like this shouldn't be some big concern like it was when they played against Indiana, and we all knew that Indiana had a major size advantage, and that was a concern for Purdue. It shouldn't be in this game. They should be able to rebound. Okay, Braden Smith and Trey Coffin-Wren should have their way offensively because I was just atrocious on that side of the ball. If Purdue cannot turn the basketball over, which has been problematic for Purdue and Braden Smith at different parts of the season, then they should win this game. They should be able to rebound fine, and they should be able to score the ball just enough to win. But if Iowa gets hot, this game could get really interesting late. I can't wait to watch. I think the game's going to be absolutely fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. So we'll see how it goes. A lot of scoring, hopefully, in that game. And then we'll get to see how IU looks at 9:00 right after it. Indiana struggling. That just kind of seems to be the theme of a lot of the sports teams in Indiana. The Hoosiers are struggling. The Colts, they're just bad. They're bad. Okay, Chris Ballard laid it out, said multiple times that they aren't close. He's exactly right. They aren't close. But there is a way for them to get a little bit closer to being close. Okay, there's an opportunity for them to raise their floor for this upcoming season. I'm going to tell you what that is when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
The best takes. The real Jonathan Smith Show. This is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? The real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket. Thanks for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in, whether that's YouTube over at Indy's Sports Ticket. Head over there and subscribe. It's free. You can also download the Indy Sports Ticket app so you can listen to my show and the Dan Dockett Show, which comes your way here in about 20 minutes. Seth Greenberg and Armando Segura coming on his show today at 1:30 and 2:30. But the Colts have an opportunity to just be a better football team. Okay, Myles Garrett has requested a trade from the Browns, and the Colts should undoubtedly go get him. What does Chris Ballard consistently do, and what feels like every single draft that he's a part of here with the Colts? He uses a first-round pick on an edge rusher. Okay, he values that position greatly, and rightfully so. Like, you need to have a guy who can get after the quarterback. If you want to beat good teams, you have to have that. And Myles Garrett is that, exactly. Okay, the Colts should trade some of their draft capital or Leatu Latu for Myles Garrett, because proven commodities are better than unknown commodities. It's part of why, college basketball and football teams recruit the transfer portal harder than they do high schoolers, because they've seen the players in college play at the collegiate level, and they have some sort of idea on how good they can be or how good they are. Whereas like with high school kids, like, you have no idea. And it's the exact same thing with the NFL draft. Okay, we spend all this time, and people way smarter than me watch all this tape, and they say, oh, well, this guy, his get-off's really good, and he does this. Yeah, that's great. But we've seen multiple first-round picks turn out to be not very good. Happens all the time in the NFL, the NBA, and in Major League Baseball. Okay, so I firmly believe that if you are a professional sports team and you have an opportunity to trade for someone who is proven, then you should do that. Yes, the Colts have Leatu Latu, and they spent the 15th pick on the draft in the draft on him last year. But no one knows how good he's going to be. Okay, he had a fine rookie year. Great. Who cares? He had 4.5 sacks and limited snaps. Great. Okay, we still have no idea how good he's going to be. He could be another Kwity Paye, where he has, 8.5 sacks a year, which is, like somewhere around the 25th, highest mark in the NFL usually. Leatu Latu could be out of the league in 2 years. Okay, he could be the next Myles Garrett. That's possible as well. Okay, they have no idea. Nobody knows. We can guess on it, but we don't know. I'm going to bet on the idea that he's not going to be the next Myles Garrett. Okay, if that was his ceiling, he wouldn't have gone 15th overall. He would have gone in the top 5. That's just the reality of it. Okay, trade Leatu Latu and a second or third round pick to the Browns, and bring in one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. Okay, Chris Ballard loves to snicker after he drafts guys and makes trades. I know you remember him last year. Ha, ha, ha. We got the best effing pass rusher in the draft. Maybe. We'll see. We don't know. How about you make this trade and then you sit at the press conference with Myles Garrett and laugh like, ha, ha, we got the best effing pass rusher in the NFL. Not even in the draft, just in the NFL, period. And if you do that, I won't make fun of you for it, because it'll actually be true. In theory, Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen are both fighting for their jobs this year. I hope that they are. And, and they could talk about retooling and bringing in more competition and all these things, and all that stuff's great. You do that. I argue you just bring in good players, because that's really what you need. You need better players. Okay? Myles Garrett would make everybody on this defense better immediately. The floor of this defense would be raised dramatically if they brought him in, because he can actually get after the quarterback, which means, Jalen Jones and Samuel Womack III, 2 guys that are average corners at best. They don't have to cover for as long. He demands a double team by the opposing offensive line. That means that DeForest Buckner, like him or not, gets a one-on-one matchup, which I like way more for him than a double team. Okay? He makes everyone better immediately. And that's what the Colts need. That's what Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen need if they want to keep their jobs. Okay? They need someone who can come in and raise the floor of this team, because let's just be really honest about this Colts team next year. They will not be some offensive juggernaut. But Anthony Richardson, he's working out with Chris Hess, who really helped Josh Allen. Yeah, that's great. Anthony Richardson's not Josh Allen. That's just the simple reality of it. We don't know how much better or worse Anthony Richardson is going to be next year. And you say, oh, well, they're going to bring in some competition at the quarterback position. Yeah, I don't know, man. If the Colts are running Jameis Winston out there or Justin Fields, I'm still not convinced that, I'm just not convinced that that's going to, lead to them scoring, 30 points a game. Even if it's Sam Darnold out there, like they're not going to score a bajillion points. It's not going to happen. Like, they have to be better on the defensive side of the ball this year. And look, getting rid of Gus Bradley and bringing in Lou Anarumo, that feels like a step in the proper direction. But here's the thing. You have the best defensive coordinator in the world. They could have Steve Spagnuolo, the defensive coordinator for the Chiefs. It wouldn't matter if the Colts don't have good players. And as of right now, like, the Colts don't have a ton of great players. Myles Garrett is a legitimately great player. Get him in the building. Shane Steichen, Chris Ballard, if you want to save your jobs, bring that guy in. Bring him in, because he will make you better immediately. Get rid of Latu. Okay? Move off of him. Okay? Maybe he turns out to be great, but that shouldn't matter right now to Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen, because they have to win this year in theory. Okay, and the other thing with Myles Garrett, he's not 33. He's 29. He's got a few good years left. Okay, he's going to be dominant for a little while longer, right? So when he kind of starts to wane off a little bit, he kind of starts to fade into the background, and because at some point, like, Myles Garrett's not going to be the dominant edge rusher that he is right now. Like, when that starts to happen, you can then go get a different pass rusher to follow after him. Okay, but he makes you better right now. And if you're the Colts and you're serious about making the playoffs, then you need to get better right now. And I firmly believe that if Chris Ballard thinks that his job is in jeopardy, then we'll see him at least make an attempt to make a deal. The Pacers, they won last night. That team's so tough. They're tough, man. And they showed it last night. They had no business beating the Jazz on the road last night the way that they did. They won 112-111. Tyrese Halliburton hitting a big three late to put them up. But once again, like, they no business winning that game. They got out rebounded by the Jazz 60-37. That's a differential of 23 rebounds. Usually when you get out rebounded like that, you lose. Oh, well, the Pacers probably just shot really well. They did not. The Jazz made more threes than the Pacers. They shot 35% from three to the Pacers 24%. Oh, well, did they get to the foul line a whole bunch and make a bunch of free throws and make up the scoring that way? No, the Jazz actually shot 10 more free throws than the Pacers did, and they outscored them by 4 points from the foul line. Usually, when you get out rebounded by 23, your opponent shoots better from three-point land than you do, and they make more free throws than you do. Usually, you don't win. Usually, that's kind of what happens. And, that is not what happened to the Pacers last night, because they did this thing that they didn't do at all last year, and that's called play high-level defense. Okay, they played great defense down the stretch. The Pacers team from last year would not have won that game last night. Look, if the Pacers didn't score in the 120s last year, they didn't win games. Like, they just weren't good enough defensively. And we have seen them really turn a corner and be elite on that side of the ball, right? Third in defensive rating in the month of January. And we saw it last night. They allowed the Jazz to make 5 field goals in the final 7 minutes and 16 seconds. 2 of those shots came after the game was basically already over. Okay, for the final second half of the fourth quarter, they locked in defensively, and they just didn't allow points. It was honestly really impressive. Okay, they only allowed 23 points total in the fourth quarter. That is not very many points in a quarter in the NBA anymore. Okay, just an incredible effort from them down the stretch. We have seen this Pacers team from last year to this year go from this fun, exciting, high-powered offensive team into an elite defensive team this year. Like that is what they have morphed into. And it's why they've won all these games in the last, month or so. It's why they went 12-2 in January. Okay, it's like they've just been incredible. It's why they're now the fourth seed in the Eastern Conference. And if they continue to play and defend at this level, like they're going to have a legitimate chance to be like the 3 seed and surpass the Knicks. Do I think that they'll surpass the Celtics and the Cavaliers? Absolutely not. Those two teams just too big of a gap. But the Knicks, they definitely could. They play them, I think, next Friday night. But they're coming up on the schedule. I know that. So if this level of defense continues, they're going to have a great chance to make a run in the Eastern Conference. So if I was you, I would just bet on the Pacers because they just don't look like they're slowing down anytime soon. Speaking of betting and gambling and doing all of those things, Terry Rozier, he got in trouble last week. He's under investigation for a betting scandal in the NBA. Pat Hoiberg, who was a Major League Baseball umpire, got fired yesterday for sharing a betting account with a pro poker player. So the NBA, they've had a few run-ins with some gambling issues. Major League Baseball has as well. To be fair to Pat Hoiberg, Jesse Rogers did report that there's no evidence of Pat Hoiberg gambling or impacting the outcomes of the games. He just shared an account with somebody. But look, when you're sharing a gambling account with a professional poker player and a guy who's making bets on Major League Baseball, then the worst is going to be assumed of you, and I would argue rightfully so. So now, just this year, or in the last year, we have these two separate NBA gambling issues, right? We got the Terry Rozier thing, and we've got Michael Porter Jr.'s brother who's been banned from the league. Okay? We've had both of those issues. Now we have this scandal with Major League Baseball with Pat Hoiberg, and we have the Shohei Ohtani's interpreter gambling incident, right? And now we've got an umpire involved. And just to kind of add fuel to the fire, there was the Pete Rose stuff when he was managing the Reds. There's some gambling issues there. In 2007, Tim Donaghy fixed games in the NBA. So the NBA is having issues with gambling stuff. Major League Baseball is. Where's the NFL's at? There has to be, there are more players, more coaches, more officials in the NFL than any other league. In any other league. More teams as well. Where's it at? Just because the numbers tell me that there's too many people involved for someone to not be doing something at least a little bit shady. Right? There's just no way that all these leagues with less players and less officials are having issues with this, and the NFL isn't. And yes, I know Isaiah Rodgers with the Colts got suspended, and Jameson Williams with the Lions was suspended for 6 games, and who else? There's another guy, Calvin Ridley. He got suspended as well. There's someone else has got to be doing something, and it's got to be a little bit bigger than what those guys are doing. Like Jameson Williams got suspended just because he gambled on college football at the Lions facility or something like that. Calvin Ridley was gambling when he wasn't even a part of the Falcons, and so there's pretty minor stuff. Where's the big one? It's got to be coming. And I'm very intrigued to see what it is. Because once again, there's just too many people involved in the NFL. There's too many people involved, and I don't know. We'll see. I'm just kind of waiting for the glass to break on that. Indiana playing against Wisconsin tonight. That game's at 9:00. If you want to watch a good basketball game before it, Purdue's going to play at 7. Both those games are on Peacock, which I absolutely hate. Because, I guess I can't complain too much. I've got a really nice friend who is nice enough to let me use his Peacock account. But, it's the basic one. And so I can't, pause the game or record the game and go back and watch it later or anything like that. It's like I'm living in the early 2000s over here. What is going on? But Indiana, they're playing Wisconsin tonight. I'm telling you right now, I'm taking Wisconsin -8.5. Indiana's going to collapse at some point. Like, there's just too many issues in that locker room and on that team for them to just kind of keep being in these games. They look like they're mentally weak, and I'm just kind of waiting on them to roll over. We'll see if it happens tonight. We'll see if it happens against Michigan. We'll see if it happens against Michigan State. But I wouldn't be surprised if it happened tonight. Indiana's going to that place where they haven't won in 27 years on the road at Wisconsin. So I'm probably going to take Wisconsin -8.5. For the Purdue-Iowa game, don't know if I'm going to bet this yet. If I do, I'm not betting Purdue -7.5. I'm not betting Iowa +7.5. I'm going to take the over 153.5 because I think it's going to be a rather high-scoring game. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to tune in to The Real Jonathan Smith Show. I'll be back on the air tomorrow from 10 to noon. And yeah, the Dan Daka Show comes your way next. Seth Greenberg at 1:30, Armando Segura at 2:30. Going to be an absolutely great show. The Dan Daka Show comes your way here in about 4.5 minutes, and I'll talk to you tomorrow at 10 a.m.